Welcome back to Run Through TV. It is Ben Sheppard here. Okay, today's guest, I've been waiting to get on for a while. Her name is Elise Downing, and a few years ago, she ran a 5,000 plus mile journey around the coast of Great Britain.
Oh God, the introduction's always the worst, isn't it? I'm Elise, and about 6 years ago now, I ran a lap of the coast of Great Britain, so it's about 5,000 miles. My mum called me a one-hit wonder and said I need to do another big adventure at some point, but 6 years on, still talking about it a lot, and I wrote a book about it which came out last year called Coasting, and now I'm doing a lot of, I guess, kind of smaller adventures, hanging out in my van a lot, spending a lot of time outside. I'm on the North Face Explorer team, which is cool, and then I'm just writing a guidebook of car-free adventures at the moment.
I mean, sometimes you've got to ask the obvious question, so here it is. Why?
It just seemed like a good idea. I think I always say that the whole thing the only way it was successful was because ignorance was bliss. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I really wasn't an experienced runner at the time. I'd not really done any ultra runs before, as in zero, none. I wasn't an experienced runner, but I think I just didn't quite realise what I was biting off. And I think if I'd done more kind of like long runs in a day and like multi-day stuff like I've done now, I just think, well, that's absolutely mad. Going for like a 3-day run with a backpack on is really hard. How could I possibly do 10 months? But I think I just didn't realise.
As you've just heard, when Elise decided to take on this challenge, she was far from an experienced runner. So when she told people about it, that she was going to do it, that she was thinking about it, what was their reaction?
When I told people, it very much split into two categories. I found like the whole kind of like running an adventure community is so supportive, and I kept like, whenever I told people who were like more experienced adventurers and I asked their advice, they were so supportive and they were like, yeah, do it, sounds amazing. And I think maybe that's because they didn't know me, so they didn't know how ridiculous this was, whereas my own friends and family were definitely a bit skeptical. Nobody really said anything at the time. Like, they were all very outwardly supportive, but they definitely sort of, like, my friends told me quite near the end that they were like, we definitely didn't think you'd make it this far. We thought you'd quit after a couple of weeks.
Logistically, this is an absolute nightmare. Like, how far do you go every day? Where do you eat? Where do you get water? Where do you recover? Where do you sleep?
Plan was that I'd camp every day, pretty much, mainly because I knew there was absolutely no way I could afford to do it if I wasn't camping. Like, I couldn't have afforded to stay in a B&B or whatever every night. And also it just seemed like that was what you did on an adventure. Like, when I was following other people, I was following Anna McNuff at the time, who was running the length of New Zealand, and various other people, and they all were just camping everywhere. And although I'd done like a bit of camping, but I hadn't done any wild camping on my own. And I thought, like, I read about like Sean Conway, who at the time was doing a round Britain triathlon, and he seemed to just like put his tent up anywhere, like edge of a football pitch, like in a sort of pipe. And I was like, well, I'll be all right doing that, won't I? And I think completely naive, like, and even now I feel like pretty comfortable, say like wild camping in the mountains, like where it's really remote and you're not going to see anyone, but I still wouldn't put my tent up on a football pitch on the outskirts of, I don't know, a city like Southampton or somewhere, which is what I thought I'd be doing. And what ended up happening is I started kind of sharing the journey, mostly just for like my friends and family, but then my brother spammed the link to my Facebook page on every running forum going, I think, so it kind of gained a bit of traction thanks to my brother. And so people started following me, and people started kind of offering me places to stay over the winter. Quite a lot of B&Bs and hostels really kindly gave me a room when they were quiet. So I ended up staying with like 200 complete strangers. And although I camped quite a lot in Scotland in the summer, over the winter in the South Coast, I basically didn't camp at all. And I've got no doubt that if it wasn't for those people, I wouldn't have made it through. Like, if I'd actually had to try and put my tent up when it was dark at 4 o'clock, stormy, in those kind of more built up areas, I just wouldn't have lasted a week, I don't think.
Yeah, Elise then did write a book about her journey called Coasting, for obvious reasons, but it must have taken a bit of time, right, to like process it before getting it all down on the page.
There was 5 years between finishing and releasing the book, and I liked the idea of writing about it. And when I first finished, I kept saying I'd write about it, but it just wasn't really happening. And I think I needed to have that kind of time and then be able to have a bit of perspective on the whole experience, rather than just kind of it being so fresh. And I think in some ways, although I obviously had like really positive memories of it, and I was like really happy I'd done it. I just kind of lumped it all together as this thing that I didn't want to do again. And then when I went to write the book, I went through all of my posts on social media, all of the videos I'd made, and like made this big spreadsheet of every day of the run to try and like remind myself what happened, because you just forget so much. And I remembered all these like smaller moments and just all the things that had made it so amazing, and people that I'd kind of forgotten about, and it was really nice to relive those moments, right, like in quite like granular detail, rather than always just thinking about it as this like big experience, because I think the best things that happened were always in those kind of like smaller moments. So yeah, it was really nice to get to relive it, and I remembered also all the like nice places that I went to. I've now got this long list of places to revisit to go on holiday.
And if you want to delve into detail about this whole journey, of course, watch the full version of this conversation on our YouTube channel, but also you can check out the book. There are highs, there are lows, but I thought we had to get a few of them on here. So what was Elise's hardest moment?
The lowest moment I would say was I'd actually come home for the weekend. I had a family event. It was one of only 2 weekends that I kind of left the coast and came home. And it was about, I think it was late February, early March. So I'd been going for like 4 months. I was in South Wales. I'd done the whole South Coast at this point. And I think the hardest thing about it always was the like never endingness of it. And I almost like forgot about thinking about if I was actually enjoying it, and just got so overwhelmed by like how much there was still to do. And I think it's easy to do that on kind of just going for a run for one day as well, isn't it? You're just like, oh, I've got another 20 miles to run. It almost becomes irrelevant if you're having a nice time at that moment. And I think I just also kept thinking, like, why did I not pick something a bit shorter? Because I was like, if I'd picked a 1,000 mile route to run, that's a ridiculously long way. Everyone would be very impressed because it was me. I've never done anything like that before. And I was like, but I picked this, I've got to do another 4,000 miles on top of this. And I remember just crying all the way on this train back to Swansea, where I was picking up the coast. And people kept asking me if I was okay. And I was like, oh, I've got to go for a run. So nobody had any sympathy for me. Unsurprisingly. And I think that was what I found really hard, and it was a real conscious effort. I kind of tried to make a real effort after that to just think like, am I having a nice time now? Like, I don't need to worry about the fact I've got 6 months to go, because that's just not helpful thinking at all.
And as the famous saying goes, what goes down must come up. I know it's the other way around, but for this, what goes down must come up. So highlights.
One thing that really sticks out to me is I was running in the Highlands of Scotland. I was going up towards where Tongue is, which is kind of the eastern side of that like strip at the top of Scotland. And it was this really wet day. I think I was doing about 30 miles. It was quite a long day. It was chucking it down. And I was planning to just wild camp at some point. But I hadn't been past a shop. So all I was going to be able to have for dinner was I had some oats. And then I got my filter bottle to fill up some like pond water and squeeze it into these cold oats. And I was really trying to psych myself up for cold oats and pond water for dinner, basically. And I was like, oh, it's going to be grim, isn't it? And all the places that I thought I might camp were like really boggy and not really campable. And then I remember there was a campsite just up ahead, like in Tongue, basically. And I was like, oh, at least I'll stay there then. At least I can like have a shower and go to the toilets and get some non-pond water. And then I remember that they had a hostel like attached to it. And I got there just before reception closed. They had one bed left. They sold like ready meals, so you could like go make them in the kitchen. They had beers, sweets. And then I remember going to have a shower and sitting in front of the fire with a Thai green curry, a packet of minstrels and a beer. And I've just never been so happy and warm in my whole life.
Non-pond water may be the greatest sentence ever said, in my opinion. Shakespearean words, I'd go as far as to say. We've all finished a race, haven't we? A 5K, a 10K. We get that feeling. But for Elise, what was it like to finish a 5,000 plus mile run?
I got to the finish line. I'd actually had a rest day the day before because I'd like put a few buffer days in the schedule and told my friends and family when I was going to finish, and then I didn't need them. So kind of physically, I felt fine, really. Like, and if anything, I felt better than when I'd started because I kind of built up this mileage and I was a lot fitter. So it was very different to finishing a kind of a more intense challenge, I guess, where you get to that finish line and you're just like, I'm done. And it was weird because I think it was the contrast between the fact that before I went and did this thing, adventure and running and stuff just hadn't been a big part of my life, really. And then it had been this all-consuming thing for a year, and then I finished, and it took me quite a long time to work out any kind of balance with those two things, because I moved straight back to London, got a full-time job again because I had no money and I had to, and just went back to kind of like, I lived with one of my best friends from uni, like went to the pub a lot, and it took me a long time to like feed running and being outside into a more like normal life, I guess. Whereas, because I think I've only experienced it really all or nothing.
Big thanks to Elise for coming on Run Through TV, and like I said, check out the full episode on the channel as well. She is absolutely brilliant. And check out Coasting as well, that is Elise's book. All right, we'll catch you again soon here on Run Through TV. Please do make sure you subscribe to Run Through TV and put the little thumbs up as well, just to say that you enjoyed the video. Catch you again.